Hi, my name's Cordy, and I think of myself as a truth dentist. And at the moment, it seems like you've got toothache, and there may be a cavity in one of your truths. And so this video is about trying to fill that cavity, not in that kind of way though. So let's drill into this. And one of the things that I've been reading recently, kind of on forums and stuff like that, there's been a lot of stuff talked about the Kemper. I think partly because of the quad cortex that is incoming, and you know, we've seen a side of the Kemper that I don't think I've really ever seen before. Suddenly the Kemper in some of these videos is looking a little less impressive and maybe a little less whatever revolutionary than what it was at one stage, and I'm not exactly sure why that is. I think there might be a couple of reasons. Anyway, so one of the first things that I read about the Kemper is that once you capture a profile, you're stuck with that, and it's basically what it is. So to me, that seems like one of the most inaccurate statements that anyone can make about one of these modelers. Here's a profile I'd made of a Mezzo-Boogie Electrodyne into a Marshall cab. Okay, here's that same profile, but actually how it started off, the sound of the amp. Okay, so obviously two wildly different tones. So this is the actual stock capture. Or profile, whatever you want to call it. And then here I've turned the gain up, I've turned the mids up, I've turned the presence down and the treble down, but essentially it's a completely different tone. So what can you do to change a profile? Maybe where did this myth that you can't do that come from? I think what most people might have tried is this sort of thing. And they thought, well, that doesn't sound very good. So just because you've got a gain knob doesn't mean you have to turn it all the way up. Okay, so when I turn the gain up, I would also turn mids up, and I would tame presence and treble, and I would do this on any modeler. And let's not forget that if you're doing this to a profile, you are essentially modeling changes to that profile. These are modeled amp controls. Think of them in that way. So if I'm going to slam the gain up, I'm also going to think about boosting mids, cutting treble and presence a little bit so that things just don't get super spiky. The same way that I would if I'd turned the gain all the way up on an amp and it had been set up for a clean tone. So other things that you can do. So this is just on the face of it, and this is relatively similar to what you might get on the actual neural quad cortex profiles or captures. You're going to get a gain, a bass, a middle and a treble. So two things to mention: the EQ can be set post or pre, and so before the amp or after, and that has a different impact. So that's worth bearing in mind. So that's if you hold down EQ, you can get to that post the position of the EQ. And if you're doing extreme changes like that, I'd suggest that putting it post the profile maybe has a bit more use, but there's no reason that you can't experiment with that to your heart's content. Now, if you press an amplifier, you get these other settings. So the volume is on the other menu, but you've got clarity, tube shape, tube bias, and direct mix. So direct mix is like your clean guitar tone. And one of the things that makes a tube screamer or a Dumble kind of amp unique is that there's an amount of actual clean tone that gets through. So if you're creating a profile which is dirty like this, maybe try bringing in some clean tone. You'll find that does a thing. Another really powerful knob is this clarity thing. So it's by default all the way off, I think. But it definitely does a thing. I like the sound of that now. So clarity does a thing. I think that one's one of the more powerful knobs here. And tube bias, I think, is sort of like sag. So if you turn it all the way up, compresses some more or something, but not a super powerful control that. And then tube shape, again, seems to be doing something relatively subtle in comparison. So clarity, though, I think is worth digging into. Now, what else can you do? Cabinet, you've got a high shift and a low shift. So high shift, you can hear you're basically doing something, making the cab darker or brighter. And similarly with the low shift, you can shave off some low end or add it in. Now, whenever you do this, if you're playing whilst you're doing it, you're going to get quite quick ear fatigue and the changes are going to sound kind of way pronounced, but if you stick on one sound for longer, you'll get more used to it. And then there's this thing called Pure Cabinet, which again does another thing. And maybe makes things sound a bit more raw and stuff. And then you've got Character as well, which I think can make things darker. But can basically change things up as well. So that's in the cab section. So again, a load more parameters that you can change. And here's the thing that I think maybe people are missing when they're doing sort of A/B comparisons now with the Quad Cortex. I think they might have some stuff on the output section. So in the output section, you've got this thing called space. And so all the way off, it sounds like this. Then all the way on, so it basically puts you in a space with that sound, much like the Strymon Iridium does with the room setting, but maybe a bit more extreme. And then you've got essentially on the main output EQ, you can EQ this stuff. So you could have a like the global EQ on the Helix. You've got settings there. Now it's not same with any global setting. I don't think it's always terribly obvious that you've got one of these things on, and I do wonder if maybe these were on. You got low cuts and high cuts. When making a demo with one of these things, if I was trying to get an A/B done relatively quickly, I don't know whether I would have checked these things, but there's definitely like the output filter, the main output EQ. Those are other ways that you can affect the sound, and also the input sensitivity. You've got a noise gate, you've got a clean sense, distortion sense, and all these little things. And that's one thing about the Kemper where it's not necessarily that easy, because you've got quite a lot of menus. There's quite a lot of deep editing. But other things you can do, you can change the cab. So essentially the profile is split into two bits and pieces. So you've got the preamp and the cabinet side of things. You can change the cabinet with any profile, and there's a video from Tone Junkie on this. And so you could find maybe like a train wreck cabinet. So this came from one of Tone Junkie's things. And I can change the cabinet to whatever I want from another potentially favourite profile. And they've all got a different flavour, and that's kind of what's cool about that. So that's just some kind of truth about the Kemper. It's not static and it's not untweakable. It's really not inflexible either. You don't necessarily have to buy lots of profiles to get lots out of it. I might just... You don't necessarily have to buy loads of profiles to get lots out of it. There are other ways. And I think it's found its way onto lots of records for a reason, and onto lots of stages and stuff like that. It's not suddenly a really dodgy unit. I think there's lots to like about the Kemper. So if you were thinking about getting one, I don't think there's really anything that's changed right now. Hopefully that was vaguely interesting, and I'll put at the end of this clip now, I think I'll probably play like a performance that I made last night. So this is all made up of the same profile. So we've got 5 different tones, very different tones. And all came from this same profile. It all started from this one profile of my Mesa Boogie. And something like this. So you can do plenty with one profile with a Kemper. Don't necessarily believe everything you read online. Thank you for stopping by. If you wanted to try out some of my Kemper profiles, there's a folder where I put them all, and you can get into that for £3.50 if you want to. But yeah, I think there's plenty more life in the Kemper. It's just about how you use it, probably. Cheers.